Shalom, this is Ronit Ziv Krieger, Education Director of the JWRP, with our fabulous JWRP trip leader, Adrian Gold Davis. Welcome to this webinar on Shabbat. This session is part of our Year of Growth series, which focuses on Jewish values and how to bring them to life. One of the highlights of the Momentum trip was our celebration of Shabbat. The pre-trip concert, singing at the Western Wall, the Kotel, Shabbat dinner, learning, walking the streets of Jerusalem, meeting your Shabbat hosts, walking through the Old City, experiencing a beautiful third meal, singing the Havdalah to end Shabbat. Reminisce with the women and ask them which part of their Shabbat experience in Israel has stuck with them. Are there additional elements of Shabbat that they would like to bring to their families and communities? As you plan your session with your women, think about inviting them to help lead and facilitate. For example, someone can host the session, perhaps with a Shabbat meal or with a gathering at the end of Shabbat. Others can lead some of the discussion. Consider asking one or two women to plan an activity to accompany the study session, such as a Shabbat cooking demonstration, an art project illustrating the blessing of the children, a meditation session, or a talk with a psychologist about how to open ourselves to contentment and to seeing aspects of perfection already in the world. Such projects make the learning memorable and can engage participants deeply. There's a richness to each of the text ideas in the written session and a flow between them, yet sometimes less is more. Don't worry about going deeper with fewer ideas to serve your women well.
You know, we live in times that I like to call a cult of productivity. We assess ourselves, our children, our very worth by what we accomplish and how quickly and efficiently we can do it. You know, lack of ambition is considered the worst form of insult. And in many ways, this is just a post-industrial mindset. What do I mean by that? Well, before the age of store-bought, pre-plucked chickens and pre-churned butter, before the bread was baked and ready to buy, we toiled to plant and nurture and harvest the food we would eat. People would collapse into bed at the end of the day, physically drained from the very work of self-sustenance. There was a less abstract definition of success. If you could eat and drink and keep your children, well, alive, this was success. Well, today, almost everything happens for us without physical toil. We have in many ways made hard work an obsession. Perhaps we just need to work a little harder than previous generations to justify our many blessings in the modern world. And we do it by being nervous and neurotic and pushing harder and harder. So the idea of Shabbos rest, or menucha, strikes us today as a waste of time, like a hindrance to our striving, a barrier to our strive for what we now call success. You know, in the old days, in the old world, and it was brought here too, there was a custom to eat a food called farfel on Friday nights. The idea came from the Yiddish word farfallen, which means finished. On Friday night, all was farfallen. It was finished, not the work, because we know the work was never done, but the effort. We know that the work of living is never finished, but the effort, well, for 25 hours, it's farfallen. Shabbat puts a pause in our efforts. It's the pause that refreshes. It's the pause that empowers us to go back to those efforts with renewed zeal and capacity. Because Shabbat does not interfere with our ability to perform. It enhances it. It enables it. It's the gift that keeps on giving, and it allows us to keep on going.
What's a good way to initiate a conversation about Shabbat? One simple way is to ask the women to share with the group a question they have about Shabbat. Or alternatively, to ask them to share 3 words that they associate with Shabbat. Either way, this is a way to enter the conversation, beginning with what's on their minds. Take note as the women speak and mark which points you can address during the session, in which you can follow up with particular women one-on-one after the session. On the momentum trips, women learn it's not all or nothing at all. This is a great concept to evoke in this session. For example, for many, exploring Shabbat begins with small steps. That was the case for me many years ago. A friend shared the idea of taking on one commandment and sticking with it for a full year before deciding if you want to keep it. My friend explained that sometimes you need to really experience something for a while before you know whether or not it's a good fit for you. I was teaching in the inner city at the time, and my husband and I liked the idea and decided we would not use the phone on Shabbat. We still cooked and drove and used technology. We found that avoiding the phone on Shabbat offered a time to connect and refresh. It gave us a new type of freedom that we came to love. It really did feel like a gift. We've never gone back to using the phone on Shabbat. The following year, we chose a new practice. In stages, Shabbat became a bigger and bigger part of our lives. My friend and colleague, Marilyn Paul, has been advocating for the culture at large to embrace the idea of a day off each week. Her work resonates with those beginning to explore the idea. As a management consultant and author of An Oasis in Time, she believes that when trying something new, it's helpful to have a model. She offers these 5 gateways to weekly rest and renewal. Protect and prepare. Begin and end. Disconnect to connect. Slow down to savor. Let go of achieving to rest, reflect, and play. Each of these builds on Jewish teachings about Shabbat. I imagine that articulating such a model could be helpful to some of your women. Protect and prepare. Protect the time you set for Shabbat and figure out what you need to do to guard it. Prepare for Shabbat, considering what social time, activities, food, and spiritual connections to include. Planning will help the time you set for Shabbat be the most restoring. Begin and end. Mark the starting and ending times. The rhythm of a regular time gives essential boundaries that help you focus at work and let go when not at work. Disconnect to connect. Google Shabbat, technology, silence, YouTube to find a few good video clips about disconnecting from digital devices in order to connect more deeply with yourself, with others, and with the experience of the transcendent. Though technology draws us and tinkers with our fear of missing out, a fear so prevalent that the FOMO acronym was coined, nonetheless, people report how genuinely fulfilling it is to get past the pull of technology and reach the satisfying connections of love and friendship. Slow down to savor. Developing a practice of slowing your pace and taking time to savor your experiences, both the joyful and the painful, offers a nurturing texture of a truly lived life. Let go of achieving to rest, reflect, and play. Release the tensions of endless doing. Let go of worries and expectations. Free yourself to rest, reflect deeply, and play more freely. After an introduction that meets women where they're at with Shabbat, set the stage for the 10 Commandments, describing the overwhelming experience of this encounter when we received them at Mount Sinai. Then read together the commandment of Shabbat, 4th of the 10 Commandments, and discuss the reflective questions. One of the things you can help women notice is that the commandment of Shabbat is actually a commandment that involves all 7 days of the week. The Torah says, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is Shabbat. Read together 2 Jewish texts that seek to understand the connection between the 6 days of work and the 7th day. Avot de Rabbi Natan tells us that both work during the week and rest on Shabbat are commandments. The Mechilta says that we need to rest on Shabbat as if all our work is done, whether or not that is actually the case. Give the women time to talk in pairs or small groups about the reflective questions, and then come back together and discuss. Sometimes life seems to be an endless cycle of doing, especially for mothers. Let women take time to imagine and hear from each other what it might look like and feel like to set aside time to just be. A way to get the women to start is to ask them about a time in their life when they experienced rejuvenating rest. What was that like? How does it give them insight into the potential and effects of a rejuvenating rest? Then engage women in the writing exercise on page 6 that sends them to page 20. In our busy culture, a rejuvenating day of rest may sound hard to do, but can also have an appeal. Rabbi Sachs writes that in the past, other cultures have at times made fun of Judaism's enforced rest on Shabbat. They considered it laziness. Read together the beautiful article about Shabbat by Rabbi Sachs and how it helps our human spirit breathe, inhale, and grow, and find time for those things that are important but not urgent. Stephen Covey, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, popularized the idea of a time management matrix to help people prioritize their time. As you see in the session, the chart has 4 quadrants for tasks that are important and urgent, important and not urgent, not important and urgent, and not important and not urgent. Many of us will be sure to make time for everything that's urgent, such as the family emergency or important work deadline. We may also spend time on things that are not important and not urgent, such as surfing the web. The things that tend to slip through the cracks are those things that are important but not urgent, such as maintaining friendships, sitting down to set personal and family goals, having special family time, or exercise. As Rabbi Sachs says, Shabbat gives us the opportunity to take a break from everything that's urgent and remind ourselves of those things that are important and not urgent. Ask the women to fill out the Finding Time for What's Important chart. What are some of the things that are important but not urgent that they would like to incorporate into their lives, for themselves, their families, and their communities? How can they realign their priorities to include those important but not urgent items? How can Shabbat help them make space and time for these things? Human beings are naturally programmed to focus attention on what's not working or out of place. We more easily see the negative than the positive. All week long, seeing problems guides us to what we can work on fixing. Seeing gaps between where things are and where we'd like them to be draws us to do something about it. However, it turns out that there are times when it can be more effective to focus on what's working rather than on the problems. Imagine your child comes home with a report card. For so many, the F would jump off the page, and we'd ask, what happened here? But it may be that building on the A is an important road to improvement. This is especially the case in times of change or in challenging times. Shabbat gives us the opportunity to stop focusing on the negative, the appliance that needs repair, the few pounds that we can't seem to lose, and remind ourselves of what's really good. This helps counteract an ingrained bias of focusing on the negative. It helps you water the seeds rather than the weeds. It also helps you to be joyful. We can stop thinking about everything that needs to be repaired and get curious about current reality, rediscovering our natural inquisitiveness, finding an ease in fully showing up for our lives, delighting in the natural unfolding of life. The Talmud tells us that Shabbat is 1/60th of the world that's coming, the world that's completely wonderful. On Shabbat, we can bring aspects of such harmony into the world by shifting our perspective and allowing ourselves to take pleasure in all that's beautiful around us. This may be what our tradition means when it says that we have an extra soul on Shabbat, an added capacity to appreciate the perfection around us. Giving our children a blessing on Friday night is an opportunity for us to focus on our children's bright spots, to show how much we love and value them, even if we sometimes don't take the time to tell them so during the busy work week. A beautiful custom is to add a personal message to your child after you give them the blessing, telling your child of various actions you had noticed during the week that stood out to you with a sense of appreciation. Knowing that you will give your child such a message and a blessing on Friday night can also impact you, can guide you for looking at your child's good points throughout the week.
My sweet sons are almost 22 and 25 years old. And wherever I am in the world, whatever else is going on, they still call me and my husband for their Shabbat blessing. When we began this beautiful custom, we'd go to them and place our hands on their head and say the blessing in English, because neither of us could speak Hebrew or pronounce the words properly. But we understood that the feel of their downy heads under our hands was like a metaphor for our protection of them, our love of them. And in some misguided way, we also thought it was a kind of ownership too. Well, as they got older and resisted coming home for Shabbat, we mourned that family togetherness at the table. We even missed their fighting and their mess. We missed the early tantrums and even the sullen silence of adolescence. We missed it all. But regardless of the physical and sometimes ideological distance between us, they never stopped wanting that Friday night blessing. As though those moments of utter focus on them, our love coursing through our hands into their brains and their hearts, was a time of perfect clarity. We loved them, and they knew it, and they loved us for loving them. And that sensation is so perfect, so empowering, that they would crave it for always. Begin now, while you can still feel the silk and swirl of their hair, while you can still see and touch them. This will create a cord of love that can be never severed. Even when they leave the nest, leave the fold, leave their childhood roles behind, they will yearn for it, because one never tires of feeling loved, focused upon, and cherished. That is when we feel truly blessed.
Now it's time to end the session. Summarize the main ideas explored in the session and highlight some of the comments and questions your women made. Show the women the Try It Out section, where we've gathered practical ideas for bringing the value of Shabbat to families. Ask the women to look through the suggestions and choose which ideas they would like to bring home to their families. Tell them that in your next session together, you'd like to hear how they've implemented the ideas and what happened. Ask each woman to share one takeaway from this session. You could ask each woman to finish a sentence such as, "A Shabbat idea or practice that I would like to bring home is..." Remind participants that this is the end of our in-class time together, but the learning will go on in the Learn with Your Sister sections. Encourage the women to commit to their learning partner sessions, even if only for 15 minutes a week. Look through the rest of the booklet with them and point out the fascinating topics to be covered. The spotlight on Israel, on the Israeli Shemitah initiative, and Adrian's soulful and honest thoughts on human beings and human doings. Let the women know when and where the next session will take place, and ask whether anyone is interested in co-leading some of the session with you. If you're combining this session with a project, a visit to a local organization, or talk from a speaker, please let us know what you're doing. Either way, log on to the Year of Growth Facebook page and share photos and stories, and invite women to share too, so everyone can learn from each other's creativity. Thank you for listening to this webinar. May we all merit to have peaceful, rejuvenating, and meaningful Shabbat experiences. Thank you to Adrian Gold and to all who have helped with crafting this session and the webinar. Eliza Sperling, Lori Palatnik, Rachel Sales, and Carly Rescott. And thank you to the Eternal for the gift of Shabbat.